Okay, so welcome to KitaKasiKonteks episode 5. Me and Prof Najib again.
Hey, Prof.
Okay, so today kita nak kasih konteks on I think a key topic in Malaysia, which is the manufacturing sector.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
we just
very
want to break it
important.
down, give people a little bit more understanding of manufacturing, and you're actually the best person to talk to because you've been,
I would say I have some knowledge on this.
you've been active in this sector for a long time.
I have been,
So,
yes. Yeah.
right. So let's just get straight into it. Kita nak kasih konteks. Alright.
Yes.
So, manufacturing industry in Malaysia. Give us a general lowdown, right? Of
Yeah.
how it started and where we are now, right?
Okay, so obviously, let me not claim to give a very accurate historical context, but I think some key milestones in our manufacturing industry's development, right? So, if you go back into history, post-colonialism, into after independence, a lot of the manufacturing sector was to do with the primary industries and the consumer industry, right? So primary industries would be around manufacturing equipment or goods from things like tin and raw materials, right? Because we were strong at mining at the time. I think there's almost a bit of a crossover historically from our traditional arts and skills in metalworking and woodworking and so on and so forth. So that sort of industry, but we were regional because Malaysia has been a trading nation for a very long time, right? So some, for example, our boats out in Terengganu, there's some boat makers who are extremely famous globally, right? And this is centuries old skills. And then I think as we began to industrialize, the real mark came probably in the late 70s when the electronic sector picked up. Now, prior to that, we also had a mechanical engineering industry, like I say, first from the primary industries, but then companies like UMW, for example, they started as a bicycle repair shop.
I see.
And if you think about it like that, some of the Japanese Keiretsus also had similar histories, right?
That's right.
Yeah, so I think Suzuki started with home appliances and Honda with I think bicycles or something like that, and then they evolved. So then in the late 70s, pushed by the government to bring in the electronic sector, and at that time mostly consumer goods, right? So that's when we had electric fans and TVs and things like that. And
National Panasonic.
We grew up with certain brands which you probably can't find around today. Philips. And that started the wave of factory manufacturing in sort of what would be a tech sector of sorts, right? Although consumer equipment, but then also there was export. That wasn't anymore just for local consumption or near regional consumption. We were already part of a global supply chain, and that's when the FDIs started coming in. The Japanese, the Americans were the biggest at the start, and then later on the Germans, and now we have most of the world has some sort of investment in Malaysia. So that then evolved, and as time went by, we began to go into the semiconductor space, right? And now, in parallel with that, the automotive sector, Proton, right, was given life in the 80s by the vision of Tun Mahathir, and that really started us on the transport manufacturing industry. Because a car is a platform, powertrain, drive system, a braking system. So we have now systems being manufactured in Malaysia for transport. We also then went into companies like SCOMI went into rail, so they started manufacturing bogies and cars. And our civil engineering side, companies like Gamuda, companies like UEM, infrastructure players. They gave the base for us to have things like rail industries, because they are able to create the support structures as required, for the tracks, right? And then all the electrical equipment that comes with that. So there's a whole industry there supporting heavy equipment and transportation. And in heavy equipment, we also have shipbuilding. We have shipyards in Malaysia, Lumut. We have Sabah and Sarawak. Also, we build whole ships. We build whole ships. We build whole ships. Everything from transport to ships for fishing. right? Fishing vessels, and a lot of people don't really
Don't know,
this,
right,
don't know that
right.
we do this kind of work. Obviously, then at the top end we have ousted, slight controversy on some of the recent projects, but naval vessels.
But the
as well.
capability is there.
The capability is there.
Right,
Capability is there. So that's heavy equipment. And in the heavy equipment also, UMW, they manufacture things like komatsu, diggers and backhoes and bulldozers and other things like that. And then you have companies like Muhibah Engineering, who own a global company called Favco that manufactures cranes.
Cranes, yeah.
So you see those big cranes, with the brand Favco. That's a Malaysian own brand, and it's a global brand, a very successful global brand for cranes. So then we come back to the semicon and high-tech sector. Then the semicon sector, then we began to go into the microchip industry, right? And we began to then service, starting with sort of telecommunication equipment, Motorola,
PJ
PJ, yes,
Right.
yeah, and then in Penang, then more footprint started growing over there, and then into many different applications, into computing, into devices, right? And where a lot of the high-tech skill is in the manufacture of the equipment to manufacture the products. Okay, so in the factories that we have out in Penang, for example, a lot of the equipment to manufacture some of these chipboards, some of the full equipment that goes into computers and say medical devices and so on and so forth, the equipment to manufacture that, which is highly complex. You've got pick and place machines that work in immensely fast rates, right? Those are manufactured by Malaysian manufacturing players, and that's very high margin business, So hence why Penang has generated a lot of revenue for the country and GDP by that same token. And then in my industry, aerospace, we are at the level of design and build. So we design a lot of these aircraft that people fly on. I think most recently controversies around doors falling off planes, but we found no issues with the doors that were manufactured in Malaysia. But the aerospace industry manufactures for Airbus and Boeing very large amounts of structure and systems in place that we fly on, not just by Malaysian airlines but by global airlines.
So any airline, any plane that you step on, there is a manufacturer.
Most probably today,
right?
you can almost guarantee that if you step on an Airbus or Boeing plane, at the very least, and some other brands as well, there will be Malaysian manufactured parts in the plane.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
The key sectors that we're talking about. Sorry, you just name them?
So they would be called the E&E, electrical electronics,
yes,
of which the partner to that would be the semicon industry, which is slightly differentiated because the E&E sometimes can refer to more consumer goods, where semicon more tech side of things, right? The microchips and such like. And then you have the M&E industry, the machinery and equipment industry. This is to do from everything from food and beverage equipment, manufacturing equipment, machines that make cakes and so on and so forth, or a part of assembly line to manufacture, say, Mummy Monster or something like that in Malacca, that M&E industry. Also then covers machinery equipment that are used in the manufacture of the electronics industry components as well, right? So that's the M&E. The M&E actually is it is the biggest manufacturing sector we have in country, because it goes across different other sectors or other products, right? And then we have the heavy equipment. And they have equipment like, say, cranes, rail structures, civil mechanical structures, right? Ships, and then the transport sector, where you have the cars, planes, and the train bogies themselves, right? So I think those are, in general, the majority of what is 30% of our manufacturing GDP.
30% of the
national GDP
comes
which
from
is
manufacturing, right?
Manufacturing,
Contributed by the manufacturing sector across the board, all these
across
sectors
the board,
that you were saying. When entrepreneurs start, right, they always I want to build a startup, or nobody says I'm going to open up a factory, right? So how, if you had that ambition, what do you do, right?
Yeah. Well, actually, that's quite interesting. I think, if you look at our backgrounds, right? Both of us were government scholars.
Yes.
Yeah. And both of us went to university, and you went overseas?
No.
You didn't go overseas, but which university did you go to? Okay, and I went to Manchester University to study aerospace, and I think in this world that we are in, it's still an academic world, right? That's how we've come through, right? So throughout our lives, our academic lives, because that's what it was, we didn't really see industry. This is very important because the people who now constitute our industry, majority don't come from this background.
Yes, so
they are technicians.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So in sort of the late 70s, when the electronics boom happened, and that was very much a direct intervention by the Ministry of at the time International Trade and Industry, right? And now it's Investment, Trade and Industry. At that time, the shop floors of these foreign direct investments was Malaysian. In fact, we used to make movies out of them. Right, Ali Setan, if you recall, right? Ali Setan, we had the characters of Minah and Mat Karan, right? And the lines of people going up to the factories in the morning, something you and I would have seen, right? Yeah, the blue, and they were all Malaysians.
Yes.
And demographically, roughly, it would have been a 20-odd% race Chinese, and then the majority would have been Malay with some Indians, right? So that was the structure. Now, I think through the just the entrepreneurial spirit that the Chinese community generally has, and the ability to take risks, that's really what we're talking about. A lot of those technicians who had ambitions at that point, right, after 5 to 10 years of working on the factory shop floor, they would have come out and established the first outsourcing capability to the companies that they were working with, or the companies that were next door to where they were working with, right? And that is the genesis of the SMEs of the Malaysian semicon and electronics industry and
so
M&E
people
industry.
who were working on the shop floor 5 or 6 years there, then they got the contract from the company or another company there, and they started to manufacture for them, right?
That's right. And the fantastic stories I can tell about this are people who started some of their factories in apartment blocks, working for a German manufacturer as an outsource in where fabrication was in the living room, 700 square foot apartment, the office was one of the small rooms that was there was a bedroom and a toilet. That was the first fabrication, and some of these companies are now 100 million revenue per year, or more even. So now coming back to what we were talking about, that you said sexy, right? It is a lack of affinity,
exposure, I guess, right?
Yes, which is why we don't see it as naturally sexy, because if you come through the way that we have come, right, we would never have touched any of these.
That's right.
And now, having said that, I'm an avid Lego fan, and as a kid, I used to put FX models together. So I've always worked with my hands, right? So for me, putting things together was always exciting and sexy, but I don't necessarily relate that to manufacturing per se, because I don't have that exposure, right? So now in Germany, for example, where you have a dual education system, where you could start as an apprentice or you could start as an academic, right? You can cross over at any point, right? Now, then manufacturing is very much part of product realization, and that's why you have in countries such as Germany and the UK and other Japan, you have deep technology companies as startups. And this is what we lack in Malaysia, right?
So our startups here are what we call just social startups in a way, right? Or solving
social problems or social opportunities. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's it's commerce, it is trading, and in essence, I mean, I've interviewed countless engineers, Malaysian engineers, trained through the same sort of story that we went through, and this ambition of I will do 3, maximum 5 years of technical, then I want to become a management. Right, that's the story recounted again and again. Why? Because in their minds, being a technical engineer, you're never going to get the big salary.
That's right.
But if I'm in Silicon Valley, you become exactly. But if I'm in Silicon Valley, I know the technical guys are the ones that will become the CEOs of the companies.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So your question, where do you start? I think now there are many more opportunities. We are a known manufacturing country. But somehow those without that experience like us have to find the opportunity to bridge into a hands-on, because it's the tacit knowledge. You know,
that's right.
When you
that's
put
right.
together IKEA furniture, have you done that before?
Yes.
Yeah,
Right.
and you end up with one screw that you don't know where the hell it goes, and you know that if you
But
don't
it's
find where
still
it goes,
okay.
well, you know that it's going
What is gonna find,
to, you know something's going to go wrong until you find where this screw goes, right? Yeah. So that tacit knowledge, knowing how things go together is something that you can't put in all the books of the world,
That's right.
right?
That's right.
And that is what forms the basis of the German industrial machine, the Japanese industrial machine, the Korean industrial machine today.
Okay. We recently saw the launch of the NIMP,
Yes.
New Industrial Master Plan,
Yeah.
late last year, right?
Yeah.
Late last year, and so it does kind of pave the path forward for manufacturing. You think about it, right? There's
Yes.
4 key drivers or
Yes.
strategies behind it.
Yeah,
Right?
missions.
Missions. That's right.
Yeah.
Which are the advancing economic complexity.
Yes.
Right. Second is digital, tech up for digital. Right?
Yeah.
Thirdly is net zero.
Yeah.
And fourthly is security and inclusivity. Right?
Yes.
So I think of course it all touches manufacturing, but the one that people don't really get,
Yeah.
or can you explain advancing economic complexity? What does that mean?
Okay.
Right.
All right. So with this is actually a referencing a piece of work by Hausman and Hidalgo,
Okay.
right? I believe it is out of Harvard University,
Mm-hmm.
and the theory of economic complexity simply explained. There's two major
Simply,
things.
KitaKasiKonteks.
KitaKasiKonteks, kan? So let's go on the theme of Lego, because I think everybody can relate to Lego as a first point to make. If you have 100 Lego bricks,
Okay.
but they're all the same type, the 4-dot Lego brick,
But in block.
the block yang 4 tu kan, then you will be limited to what you can make, right?
Yes.
And anybody has had a Lego set before, you have resemblance of cars, resemblance of houses, but not quite accurate and not as sophisticated, right?
Mhm.
With just the 4 bricks. But if you had 100 Lego bricks but different shapes and sizes, then you could make a lot of things which are more accurate
Yes.
and more useful, right? Because you have that flexibility. So what are those Lego brick parts in the manufacturing economy? It's design and engineering capability, it's complex tooling capabilities, it's robotics and automation capabilities. So having the different capabilities, right, that constitute the ability to produce something or anything, right, gives you complexity. But if you only have 1 or 2 of those capabilities, then you're not really able to
That's
pivot,
right,
right?
that's
So, and the second part of economic complexity is monkeys.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's another thing that we can relate to in Malaysia. It's about the ability to then, like monkeys in a forest, jump from one tree to another.
Okay.
So if you are on today the automotive tree, do you have the ability to jump to the aerospace tree,
I see.
right? Yeah, and this ability to go into different industries, if you look at the Atlas of Economic Complexity, you can see very complex diagrams of how adjacencies, they call it, have been realized in complex economies. So if you compare like the Malaysian economy versus the Korean economy, you'll find in Korea you have more core capabilities that have been expanded into multiple
I see.
product spaces,
I see.
where Malaysia is still a little bit more confined because of the lack of complexity.
But
Yeah.
that story comes back to our initial story just now, right? The complexity, meaning that when we started in just these areas and it kind of grew across the board, right?
Yes.
So we have a bit of complexity. I would
Yes,
say,
we
right?
do. Yeah, certainly. Looking at where we stand in the region, yeah, we are certainly ahead of the game. I think Singapore has got more. Certainly, Singapore has invested very strategically in realizing several key parts of the complexity chain, like engineering, research, and so on and so forth, which in fact take long gestations to mature, right? And then now it's also part of their education. The National University of Singapore, National Nanyang Technical University, all of these guys are global research giants now already for companies which are developing the technologies out of Singapore. Right?
Okay. So having this complexity to a certain degree, I guess,
Yeah.
right? And I think this is why we can attract certain
Yeah.
FDI.
Yeah.
I mean, like, we're still, I would say, a competitive
Yeah,
country for manufacturers.
an attractive country.
Right, an attractive country.
I think we are still an attractive country. our competitiveness is ambiguous.
I see.
At the moment. Our competitiveness is ambiguous because we are neither cheap, neither are we high value adding, right?
So is it fair to say that in the previous cycle, let's say, right, we were competitive because of our cheap labor, plus the natural safety of the country, no earthquakes and everything else, plus the fact that we are our level of English is quite high, right?
Yeah.
So that was the kind of like the basis of things, right?
That was the basis of things, and don't forget highly subsidized economy.
That's right. Yeah. So we attracted a lot of FDI now. So now, if you look at the RMK12,
the top nation
plan, right? Yeah. There is a certain segment in there that talks about being high value, going into high value manufacturing. Right?
Yes.
So again, and I think it's very apparent that we know that we can't keep on relying on cheap labor, right?
Yeah.
So that shift towards high value manufacturing has to happen, right?
Yes.
And economic complexity helps moving, right? So
yes. Yeah.
So how do we move into high value, right? That's I think the key question that a lot of manufacturers are asking, right? So can you kind of or what does it mean first, high value? Let's talk about that.
So let's kind of go back into those. We talked about you mentioned those four things, right? Economic complexity, digital, net zero, and the inclusivity and security, right? All of these are missions. They're called missions, right? And that mission language comes out of the mission economy work by Mariana Mazzucato, right? And if you read the books, of which there's a series, you will see how the American economy was developed by similar types of drivers, right? And the reason why they're called missions is because it's referring, actually one of the central examples she gives is the moon landing, right? American moon landing. So to set a goal that nobody knows how we're going to get there, it's such an audacious goal, but being clear that if we are able to achieve that, then what is it that we would have accomplished? All right. Okay. So that is first the mindset of the high value that we have set in our national strategic plan.
So if you take it back to Proton, for example, producing a car, that was the end goal.
Oh, that was it. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And then everything that led up to it was building capability towards
so
that, right?
And therein might have been some of the challenges of Proton becoming a global player, right? Should it have been building a car or becoming an automotive nation, right? So automotive nation may be more complex than just building a car.
That's right.
Right? So I mean, it's rhetorical at this point, but this kind of clarity is important because I think what we find with Malaysian sort of engineered products today, they are still lacking the identity of the design know-how that originates from this country. Which is quite a contrast from traditionally. If you look at our Malaysian houses, our Malaysian boats, our Malaysian...
There was a signature. There was a, right.
You could tell, it was design and engineering that was built for purpose.
That's right.
Right? A traditional kampung house has got the best fluid dynamic properties for cooling, of all houses, right? Because of the way that the materials work and the way that it's constructed, right? So that kind of thought process then imbued into products. If you look at the Japanese car versus a German car, you can see this. German car, you get in heavy steering, heavy brake, right? And very solid sort of feel to the car. Japanese car, you can feel the economics of it.
That's right.
And the light steering, everything feels as if it's optimizing the economics of the car, right? So that is a culture.
Okay, so welcome back to KitaKasiKonteks, episode 5, talking about manufacturing in Malaysia. So Najib, we're talking about high value.
Yes.
Right. Moving into high value, we're talking about culture. Right. So let's just pick up that from that, right? And just go back to how do we get to high value, right?
So I think where we left off, I was giving examples of German and Japanese engineering and values embedded in products, right? For Malaysia, therefore, to go into high value, there's a U-curve, they call it, right? And this U-curve, on the left-hand side of the U-curve, it talks about engineering and design as the value creation, right? At the bottom segment of the U-curve is contract manufacturing, i.e. just the production part. And then on the right-hand side of the U-curve is the marketing and branding,
Right.
Okay, so the marketing and branding good example is we do a lot of contract manufacturing for rubber gloves and the one-fingered glove. So, but when it's branded as Durex and all these other brands, right? It adds between 50 to 100%, or in some cases even more, in terms of the price of the product. So
That's
because
right.
of the brand and what the brand represents as a quality and a standard,
Yes.
right? So so that's the branding value, and then on the other side, which is the engineering and design, is where you intrinsically insert value so that you take more of the chunk of the value of the whole of the U curve, right? So we need to increase on both these sides because we are predominantly down here with some bits, so with aerospace, for example, we have quite a bit of this side, but we can still go further up into the, we do major structures, but we could do maybe unmanned air vehicles, kereta terbang and stuff like that, right? And on products on this side, I think, Malaysian quality, as you remember when we were young, if somebody said made in Taiwan, you're like, that's the crap one, right? But today, made in Taiwan is, it's some of the best quality in the world, right? So evolving that brand statement and then having our own brands that carry that kind of thing, then that's where the high value, i.e. people pay more to Malaysia for what it exports, right? And that's what we're trying to go for high value.
We've seen this big push towards 4.0.
Yes.
This was, last 5 years, I think.
Right? Yeah. Industry 4.0, as the Germans would call it.
Are we there yet, or is the manufacturing still not at the 4.0 level? It's automation and AI and all these other things. Have we achieved that milestone?
Oh man, I'm just completely recalling that scene in Shrek, right, with the donkey and
Are we there yet?
Yeah, and then at the end he says, stop asking, right? And really we've kind of been doing that same Shrek journey, right? We've been asking that question: Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? And somehow this journey hasn't been very progressive, right? We've had certain milestones that we have achieved, but they're almost anecdotal to the ambition that we have, right? So when I say anecdotal, the ambition that we have is that it's something which is related to what we were aspiring to. Like we would say, we now are the world's largest rubber gloves producers, right? But the ambition was to be a medical devices hub. So kudos to the rubber glove guys. They've made a milestone. But as far as the country is concerned, the ambition was to be a medical devices center, right? So it is anecdotal to that, right? And somehow what we haven't achieved, and this was explained to me by a very wise guy, Professor Nordin, one of my mentors. There's a big difference between project management and change management. So project management is when you achieve the outcome of a project.
That's right.
Right?
Okay.
Which is like we say the car. Making a car. But we have an automotive industry requires a change.
That's right.
Right? And that change management is something which in Malaysia I think we don't do enough of, because it is very holistic. It's not just a KPI. It's not a very narrow or singular KPI. It is the achievement of a new state of our country's ability, our country's standing as a manufacturing nation. Yeah. So that I think, to answer your question, are we there yet? No.
Okay.
We have these anecdotal still reporting, as opposed to real change.
Okay. How does the future look like for Malaysian manufacturing? Are we going to be a key player?
Yeah.
And you're talking about the curve, right? So,
Yeah.
Right. So how does that look?
Okay, so first of all, I think we have to stop thinking of ourselves as Malaysian manufacturing. Okay, I think what the world has become over the last, let's say, 50 years, right, is quite different, and the changes have been on an exponential curve. Yeah, what they say today is that we are at the singularity. Right, or as Ray Kurzweil in his famous book says, the singularity is near. And what does that mean? Is that there's a confluence of technologies and capabilities and circumstances, geopolitics and all that, which are confluencing to create massive change in a very short space of time. You know, we're that part of the hockey curve when it's about to go up, and because of that, and AI, I think, you know, artificial intelligence, which I feel is a misnomer in itself, but okay, let's go with that. Is really now beginning to disrupt us in a way that we can feel this hockey curve, right? You know, I think like 4.0 was supposed to be that, right? Video conferencing, for example, was supposed to be that, and it is part of that. But I don't think, although we felt a big change, we didn't feel an exponential change, right? Yeah. Whereas AI is doing it now. You can feel already now jobs evolving extremely fast already, and you can see the layoffs coming already for jobs which may not become relevant anymore, you know, and then creating 3, 4, 5 times levels of productivity for certain activities which were very human centric before, right? So when this singularity happens, then Malaysia as a manufacturing nation needs to understand the context of products in that singularity space, right? And my contention is that most products will be as a service, AAS, you know, which is what you have to watch as well, right? So the as a service product model is where you don't own the product. Best example everybody can relate to is Kowe or Kuku. You know, anything that is in your kitchen or your air conditioning that you pay on a monthly basis. At the moment, you're paying on a monthly basis for a technology service. Yeah, effectively, you don't own the product, and in after 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it is, they take the old one, they give you a new one. Right. You know, that business model has got 2 major disruptions in the for manufactured products. The first one is that the products are now much more easily integrated into a cyclic economy.
Circular.
Yeah. Right. So you don't own the product, so it goes into the circular economy, which means they take it back, they can design it so to recycle, they can manage the value chain, they can manage the materials, how those get done. They can even offer you modular products at some point where you can choose modules, you know, and you're not so bothered because you don't own the thing, you just want the service of it, right? So so that disruption means low carbon footprints, and if you recall, number 3 in the missions, push to net zero, these will result soon in carbon border taxes in Europe and America and other countries. And these carbon border taxes means that products coming in will have to have carbon certificates, verified carbon certificates, and they must have carbon footprints which are equivalent or more competitive than the carbon footprint of the products in these developed nations, which may have very low carbon footprints already because of higher levels of technology, green energy, and so on and so forth. So by being part of a circular economy, it allows you an easier route to that, and therefore companies which are producing products which are throwaway products will not be able to compete with the service as a service model easily, if that's what the as a service model then enables, which logically it sounds like it. The number 2 thing that the as a service model gives is that the lack of ownership means that the products can now be designed to be have longer longevity, lifespan. Okay. So the number of products that you have to create will be less.
I see.
So I think in the automotive industry, as opposed to the mobility industry, right? So they say in America, I think 470 odd million cars or something like that for the automotive consumer market, which means you and I go to the shop, buy a car, take it home, use it, and then put it in the dump yard, right? That industry versus the mobility industry, which is characterized by or epitomized by the autonomous vehicles that Elon Musk is trying to do, right? Will result in something like 50 million autonomous or mobility vehicles being able to do the job of the 400 or 500. So now you see, if that were to happen, that's a 1/6 ratio roughly, right? And then production technologies today, if you look at machining, for example, machining is the basic machinery and equipment technology that allows you to take a block of metal and cut it down to a component, right? That has a typically 60-70% material wastage sort of ratio, right? So you throw away most of the material and then you get the final sort of machine component. Just opposed to that is 3D printing, where you only use the material that you need, right? Or as close as possible to that, maybe 80% plus material utilization as opposed to 60-70% material waste, right? So if you have a lot less products to manufacture, then the slower manufacturing but more carbon-friendly technology now becomes viable, which is what 3D printing is, right? And that will change the manufacturing technology from subtractive to additive. right? One, subtractive manufacturing is very much a mechanical process, because you don't necessarily, the machine shop doesn't dictate their material specifications, right? That comes from the mill or whatever it is that supplies the material. But the 3D printing shop will have to metallurgically build up the metal, which is a different skill set altogether, right? So skills and competences are very different in this. So it will change the manufacturing capabilities, right? So first, to summarize then, you have to see yourself in the new space. So forget about just Malaysian manufacturing. If you're a manufacturer, you're competing on a global scale already, right? From day one. And this is what in aerospace is easy to do, because you only compete on global scale. You don't have a local aircraft, right? And then number two is that in competing in global scale, understanding the shifts, and this is why economic complexity now becomes so important. Because when the product shifts in that sort of direction, then without the complexity, you won't have the ecosystem to support the new types of manufacturing that will, and then hence the traditional capabilities will then become obsolete. Yeah, and then you could have very big jumps drops in GDP, because product evolution.
I see.
Yeah.
So that is a challenge for the country, I guess, right? It's
Absolutely,
being addressed. It's been looked at.
It's being discussed. It's being discussed. It's been documented, and there are initiatives. But I think fundamentally, we've already seen, and we're on a podcast now. The production is, kudos to Rain back there, who does all the production work for us. But the tools that she has today to do this level of production is amazing, right? And it would have cost hundreds of millions of ringgit maybe 50, 60 years ago to do this quality of production, and now you can do it on a laptop and an iPhone, right? So this was what, and again, this is in Mariana Mazzucato's works, the dematerialization of, and Reka as well's work, dematerialization of products. That means the iPhone, for example, or the mobile phone is now compressing camera, computer, telephone, TV camera, laptop, GPS, navigator, all into one. So what would have filled up a house before has been dematerialized into a small device, right? And I think Apple just launched the Apple Vision Pro. That is a major game changer, because now you'll no longer look down onto your device. Everything will be superimposed onto your world. And that will change the way we interact with one another and do business.
True. So I think as we go on to this podcast, we were talking about ESG last week, which also affects the manufacturing sector, like I said, the circular economy. So we'll try and piece things together so that you get more context. Right. But I think this was a really good discussion today. Right? It's a kind of overview, breaking down what is complex, right, into simpler context. Right. I always say that if you know the complexity, then you can simplify it for others, and that's what we try to do with KitaKasiKonteks. So that's episode 5.
Episode 5.
A wrap, right?
That's a wrap.
And we'll see you in the next episode of
KitaKasiKonteks.